of inviting me to share some thoughts about what unites us, the pursuit and the learning of languages. I started my career as a language teacher. I learned French at the Alliance Française, which was only by accident because my father said I should learn a foreign language. And the nearest to my home was the Max Muller Bhavan. So I went there, they looked at me, they looked down at me, and they said, oh, you're only 13 years old, we don't teach 13-year-old people any German. You have to be 16 years old. How children born in Germany are speaking German, I don't know. So I then had to go this long distance to Masabdang from Narayanpura, where they accepted me. I say accepted because there was a long waiting list. There were 40 people enrolled or requesting to be enrolled, and there was place only for 20. So about 25 years ago or 30 years ago, that was the situation in this city, in the Twin Cities. If you wanted to learn an international language, they chose you as a student. You did not have such a clear, easy access to the places of learning. Things have changed. The internet came, satellite TV came, the world is within the reach of people, and people have had greater choices as to what they could do, what they could learn, because if you didn't know to do French or German, there was nothing else to do in Hyderabad then. But now you have many more things, many more options. That has changed. So you can choose. To the extent that when I returned after 10 years in Europe to India, and I set up Skill Guru, I would have people come to the office and sit down and say, okay, I join your class. I join the French class. So what will I get? If you speak Telugu, sir, neni class chese na kem vastadi sir? French class cheyte French vasthadaya. You join a French class, what you get is French. But no, the people who joined my French classes when I was a student were those who came for French language, culture, civilization, literature, drama, art, poetry. That is what attracted people who were along with me but much elder to me in those language classes. But now, people who come to join language classes, I see are doing it because they want to get a job. So you pay 5,000 rupee fee and you give 2 months of your evenings for this language class. So now you should expect to get a 50,000 rupee salary job. This is the expectations people have. So the profile of people pursuing language learning has, unfortunately, to my knowledge and understanding, deteriorated in the context that people are seeking less culture and more jobs through language. But language is not only about jobs. It is, as Prabhakar Rao already reminded us, it is the oxygen of human life and civilization. We have 7,000 languages roughly. I say roughly because it's a little difficult, this exercise of distinguishing a dialect from a language. But nearly 7,000 languages are listed in the inventory of human civilization. We also know that nearly 7,000 languages have so far extinguished because they did not have any kind of patronage. 2.5 years ago, in Nepal, the last speaker of a language, Kusumba, died. It was very sad. It happened in also Andaman and Nicobar. It happened also in Alaska. But that it happened in Nepal and the context in which it happened was terrible. What is terrible about that? There were 3 people left in that language population. 2 of them, a mother and 2 children, 2 of them disowned the language. They said, we don't want to be known by this language. They went down the mountains, mixed up with the people of the plains, and they said, we don't want to be identified by the mother tongue. We want to be mixing with people who speak, according to them, mainstream languages. Why is it sad? Not because they made a choice of which language they want to speak. That choice we all have. It is because the language that they left was a language which was discriminated against. They did not want to be identified by that language because it was not a language of prestige. It was not a language that was valued by others. It was not a language that opened doors to them. Something like the Gond language in our own part of the country. Something like many of our mother tongues, because instead of speaking in our mother tongues, take a look at this. The Telugu speaking people here in the 2 states would be of the order of 90 million people. That's 1.5 times the population of the United Kingdom. And the United Kingdom is made of 4 countries, of which English is in 1 country. And yet, we do not have the major transactions in our country, in our states, in the language of our birth. Of course, not everyone is happy with Telugu because there are people who speak Urdu and there are people who speak other languages as well, Gond for example. What I mean is, the language of the mother tongue seems to be less privileged, and as we were reminded before I started speaking, if we have grip on our language, the language of our home, which also becomes a language of our thought, then we get good competence and we are better prepared to acquire other competences. That leads me to say one thing. Languages and language learning is really an adult problem. We are in a multilingual society. Look at how children pick up a language so easily in play and game and dance. And yet it is the adults who are quarreling about language, its status, its privilege, and so on. That is a terrible misunderstanding about how one learns a language. As I told you in the beginning, I went as a 13-year-old to learn German, and I was told I couldn't. No, it's not that I couldn't learn, it's that they could not teach. Because languages are acquired right from the time you're born, and you are able to focus on what is around you. In the first few months of your life, your eyes start focusing, your ears start being able to listen well, and the brain starts developing. Our cognitive faculties improve, and we start speaking languages. We've been doing this all through the history of humanity that we can document. Not when our brains were 500 grams in weight, not when they were 750, not when we were Homo habilis, but when we moved on to become Homo sapiens sapiens, when we started living together in groups, and when we started actually immigrating out of Africa, roughly 70,000 years ago, as Professor Anderson pointed out and told us. It should have been the time when language developed, because without the tool and the aid of language, the first migration of population would have been impossible. And that we have traced. That we have traced to roughly 70,000 years before now. So language would have been part of, not with the present complexity, but it would have been part of that. We also know that from the various studies of phonemes that linguists and scientists dealing with the subject are advising not southwest. That's a problem that will be sorted out, but the broad mechanism of how language, where and how it's spread is clear to us. And that is how language with the humans, with the improved capacity of the brain, developed and spread around the world. We are told that there are troubles with language and how languages do not work well with each other. And the interesting story in the Bible of the tower, which God declared was to create confusion, and therefore all these languages were imposed. So somebody not thinking right is telling us that language is a curse on people. What a stupid idea. Language is the means for our self-expression. Language is what brings us together. And language, across cultures, across religions, across the ages, across civilizations, is what gives unity to humankind. There is no doubt about it. So language is not a curse on us. It is a gift of the human brain. And it is a product of us being together, of cooperating, of thinking. Because actually I'm only repeating and expanding on what Professor Prabhakar Rao Garu said. Because as he reminded us, this is what makes us different from the animals. And that we can ideate, that we can use symbols and connect them with grammar, rules, in a way that makes it accessible, that my symbol and my symbolism is accessible to others, is what makes language, and in fact what makes society possible. And therefore it is a foundation of civilization. But of course, when languages do not speak well to each other, then we have trouble. Like, you know, the Treaty of Vucale, 1889, between Italy and Ethiopia. I don't know how many of you are aware of this historical fact. Ethiopia was conquered by Italy. A long, long time ago, the Roman civilization was one of the biggest imperial powers of the world. And then they lost it all. And then they became a very small, not very strong country under the influence of a religion-influenced society. And then, because the French were doing it, because even the little country of Belgium was doing it, because the Spanish were doing it, the Portuguese were doing it, the Italians also thought they should do something. And then they went and they occupied or tried to occupy Ethiopia. And Ethiopia and Italy, it was not the kind of relation other European countries had with their colonies. And therefore, Ethiopia was able to come to a treaty with the Italians. That is the treaty I'm referring to. And treaties are written in text, and the text has to be translated so that those who speak Amharic and those who speak Italian can understand it. Was it the cleverness of the translator or the treaty maker or the inefficiency? We do not know. But in the Italian text, Ethiopia was made a protectorate of Italy, whereas in the Amharic text, the emperor of Ethiopia was given full powers, almost autonomous powers to deal with international affairs. So over 6 years, they quarreled and they squabbled, but when language translation is a problem, the only way to solve it is by a war. So they had a war, and in the war, Ethiopia won. So this is how we know language translations can create trouble. Not only that, we also know that one of the greatest misunderstandings in the history and the belief of the world is the misunderstanding in the translation from the Bible, where a simple word which was to have meant a young woman was translated as a virgin. And you know what all happened in 2000 years, because a virgin gave birth to Jesus Christ. It was simply a mistranslation of a young woman. which is why we need a professional translation bureau in every city and in every place, so that we do not have these misunderstandings and troubles. So, when we talk of culture, when we talk of this kind of activity, we immediately think of Europe. Why is it? The reason is really historical, colonial, and imperial. All these three reasons are why I speak to you in English today, and most of us have the English language as our language of the intellect. And for some of us, the language of our emotions as well. We don't need to recount the history, but only that we can draw a parallel that there was a time when Sanskrit played a role of the kind that Latin played in Europe, that it was a language of prestige, it gave vocabulary, others had to adapt to it, and slowly it gave way to other languages. And we know that for a number of years, the French language was the lingua franca of all diplomacy in Europe. And what works in Europe will work in its colonies as well, because more than half the earth was occupied by the Vandals who left Europe to occupy other countries, to subjugate them, to destroy their culture, and to impose their language. But that is the fact of today's world, that the language that we speak is a language that we are forced to speak because somebody occupied our lands before we were born. There's no need to be resentful of history. History happens, we move on. What we are left with today is that of all the languages that have colonized the world, the English language is the most dominant. And why is it the most dominant? The English language is the most dominant in today's world. Previously, Latin, Sanskrit, and other languages were important, Arabic. They were important because they were the languages of the physical military conquerors. That is not necessarily the case today with English language. Today, the language of commerce and the language of entertainment are the languages that are the most widespread. Let us not ignore or underestimate either the constructive or the destructive effect that any entertainment value a language can bring. If American English is popular, it is because American TV is popular. Let us understand that. So the means by which a language is spreading its influence and its grip today has moved from military might and political strength to some extent privilege, commerce, culture as reflected in entertainment. This is one trend that we have seen. Having said that, when we say, and if we say, that the languages of the world today, the most dominant are European languages, which European languages are we talking about when we say that? It is all right to say European languages. What do we mean by Europe? We have friends from Turkey here. Now, is Turkey part of Europe? Has the rest of Europe accepted Turkey to be part of the European Union? Is Professor's language Russian part of Europe? Because Russia has not joined the European Union. They are not geographically part of Europe. They would like to be part of the European Union. Look, the European Union started like a club with people sitting around a table this size. Western Germany, and then Italy, and then France. And then Luxembourg, which is not even a country, it is a duchy. You throw a stone, it will fall in the next country. It's so small. So there is Luxembourg. And there is Belgium, which is the size of Gachibowli and Medak and Rangareddy, nothing more than that. And the Netherlands. These almost six countries, 5 countries and a half, got together and they said, let's form the European Union, because they needed to protect the interests of the coal manufacture and the iron and the steel industry. Do you know that Europe does not anymore produce? It has moved forward. The 6 countries have now become 28. And these 28 countries, now starting from the original founders of the European Union, have expanded to up to Croatia. There are 3 scripts, 3 different scripts in the languages of Europe today. We all know that the Greek and the Roman, the Latin alphabet have influenced the modern European languages. But the Greek alphabet itself was influenced by the Phoenicians. That also we know. And Phoenicians are not from Europe. So that is how the script and everything else developed in the countries there. And it's not one language family when we say European languages. We are talking about the Romance languages, but that's not the only. You have the Slavic, you have the Hungarian, you have the Germanic languages, you have the Slavs. All these are inputs into modern European languages. And the 28 countries contribute to 23 languages in the European Union. And 23 languages in the European Union means 300 million euro annual translation budget for the European Union. Because if I stand up and speak in Croatian, then each of the other 22 languages of the European Union, they have the right to listen to your speech in their language. And this is what is happening. It has become a bit crazy. And Juncker, who is President of the European Union, he said, come on, I think this is getting a bit too much. Let us have English, or a kind of English, as our working language. Minister in the French ministry, he brought in a law. For those who speak French here, can you raise your hand? So I know if what I'm saying makes sense. Or not too many, okay. Tout bon can, by the sound of it, you will recognize, be translated as all good. Tout is all and bon is good. Tout bon said, if there is a word in the French language that exists for a word in the English language, then if you use the English word in advertisement, in an official document, in an official communication, then you shall be fined. The next day, the whole country started calling him Mr. Allgood. People don't care for those who try to legislate about language. Language is organic, it develops. It is nurtured in the minds of people. It is nurtured by culture and it nourishes culture. That is how languages grow. It feeds our creativity and is fed off it. The multi-splendored civilization we create is through this way. You can't have an academy of 300 people telling you, that is not French, you can't use that word. But then we are always encountering idiots like this, who try to tell us what language we have to speak. We have to recognize that such tensions exist in Europe as well. Apart from that, you have also the attempt to try to make a particular language the dominant language of the region. Such things are also the case, as we have seen in recent times in Europe, as they are struggling with the creation of the European Union. Now, they're trying to create the European Union. They succeeded in creating a common market. They tried to create a European Union. They are struggling with a common currency. They are struggling also with a system which will make it democratic and less technocratic. That is an ongoing process. It's not about failure. You don't create 26 countries, 28 countries union just overnight. It takes centuries to create a political entity which is functional. In the process, we see that you have a Brussels-centered situation, because the European Union is based in Brussels and the Council of Europe is working out of Strasbourg, as I'm sure you know. So in the process, what has happened is that some languages became more important, some less. I mentioned to you that 3 scripts are the main scripts in the present day Europe's languages. And I also mentioned to you that there are different language families. There is also a Semitic language family which is part of the European official system of languages. This might surprise you, because Maltese language, which is part of the EU languages today, is really a dialect of Arabic. The script is used as a dialect of Arabic. So even that is part of the scripts being used. But of these, naturally, the most powerful language is German and French, because of geography and because of the strength in the economy. Now, a study has revealed that even though the United Kingdom makes up for 11% of the population of the European Union countries, less than 5% of the people who are working in the European Union official structures are actually people with English as a mother tongue. So you see that even though English is a European language, of course it is much more than that, it is a world language. Its own representation in Europe is less than what its numbers should indicate to us. European Union is largely a French and German enterprise, which is why the United Kingdom is constantly asking the question openly and sometimes unthinkingly whether they should be part of Europe or whether they should be out of it. But is all this merely a matter of numbers? And is all this merely a question of which language is important for commerce? I would like to invite your attention to the fact that it is not. I say not opinion, but fact. Europe already. Latin is no longer alive. And then we know that Old Greek is no longer alive. But what does Europe have that Greece has not given? What is there in Europe that did not have some connection with Greece? Its thought, its philosophy, its belief, its logic, its politics, everything, its drama. Not only that, even its tragedy is from Greece. Greece has an unmistakable stamp on the culture, the language, and the thinking of Europe. And yet we know, just a few months ago, Greece was saying they would leave the euro, and they were very ready to do that. So from far away, Europe looks like it is a nice and calm place. It largely is. There is no physical violence of the kind we see every day on page 3 in Deccan Chronicle. But that unrest is different from the great turmoil that Europe is going through, trying to become one in a real sense. So why is it that when we speak of Europe, we are thinking Spanish, we are thinking English, very rarely, because English is not considered European, just considered international, as in a world lingua franca. And we speak German, French, German, Spanish. Why? That is because of politics as well. Why would one not speak so much of Russian as a European language? Greater experts are here, so I shall speak slowly and carefully. The reason why Russian is not predominantly considered a European language is because Russia never wanted to be European. Russia wanted to be like America, international, global. It had that reach. It still has those ambitions, which is why being confined to the European Union would not do justice to the ambitions that Russia has. Then we have France. France, which tries to hold on to its former colonies in the form of a francophonie, and a francophonie which is slowly and slowly becoming less dependent on France, as it should be. And then you have the Commonwealth, And the Commonwealth is not all that enamored of an aging country with an aging queen, because it does not give leadership to the world. Leadership is important. Strength is important. The economy is important. Military is important. And the possibility of free exchange of people between countries is important. Immigration policies become important. And we know that Europe has been steadily closing its doors. And yet, we know that some countries from Europe are very eager that people outside their countries, outside their colonies, learn their languages. The first Alliance Française in India, and for those who are not familiar with it or with the language learning institutions, the Alliance Française is an organization founded, amongst whom was Louis Pasteur, the great immunologist, and very many other people, Victor Hugo, who wanted to promote French culture around the world. Now, what is French culture? Is it French culture spoken by people living in France? Or is it French culture spoken by people who speak French, who live in Belgium, who live in Switzerland, who live in North Africa, and who may live in Pondicherry? Very often, the spread of languages is powered by the funding of specific countries. We have to be aware of it. That is the situation, the reality, because there are a huge number of people who speak the French language, who don't live in France, who don't have a French passport, and who probably France will not allow to visit them. But they are also speaking French. That is also French culture. So there is one challenge for us to talk about what we mean by French, what we mean by European, whether it is simply language, whether it's culture, and so on. Now, in this city, I think in the 1960s, there was an American library. I think till 1985, there was a Russian, Indo-Soviet cultural center in this city. The Alliance Française was established in Hyderabad in 1980. But you'll be surprised that the first Alliance Française of this country was established in Pondicherry, then not part of our country, and that was in 1889. So long ago. So countries have been trying to invite other people to learn about their language, and there are many reasons to do that. Now, why did the Soviet Union close down its center here? For what reason did America close down its American library in this city? Why, actually, did Maximilian Bhavan close down? If the spread of religion, the spread of culture has just itself as its objective, then they would keep going on. But the fact is, countries seek to extend their influence, dominance, and domain of influence around the world. And for a reuniting Germany, spreading German culture in this city was not a priority. So they closed down the center. And then all this liberalization started happening, and they said, wow, there is something happening in India. How can we be not there when the action is going on? And they came in with the Goethe Center. Now I submit that the right pursuit of a language will be not through nationally funded cultural institutions. They are essential and they are good, but there must be a disinterested pursuit of the goods of language learning and the learning and cultivation of international culture. And this is why 8 years ago, when Professor Prabhakar Rao Garu started those dynamic activities here, I was delighted because I was part of the cultural institutions funded by nations. And just like they fight in Europe with each other, they fight in Hyderabad with each other. So this culture of expats coming here and fighting is a low-level culture that is spread. Culture, language, civilization, normal life, of indebtedness, of terrible disaster. But that aside, when we talk about this poison notice, you see that it's there in 14 languages, that notice. Don't do this and don't do that. If you buy a computer from Europe, you get a manual which is as heavy as the computer, which is telling you in 23 languages what to do when the computer doesn't start. Usually when the computer doesn't start, it's because you forgot to plug it in. But that's a different story. But having looked at the complexity of this, we also should see what Europe has achieved. What Europe has achieved is a kind of linguistic democracy, where you do not feel ashamed that you speak a language, that the language which you got by birth and in which you went to school and college to think for yourself is not a language to be ashamed of. Very different to the language speakers of Nepal, who I told you disowned the language of their birth and moved on to other languages. This is Europe's unique achievement. Now, Europe also has some other problems. You know that the French, and I speak with no rancor, I have been a teacher of French, I speak Smriti Irani. And that is how last year, 2014, midstream during the academic year, in Kendriya Vidyalayas, the Ministry of Human Resource Development decided that not German but Sanskrit or any other modern Indian language should be given as a third language option to those who are in class 6 to class 8. 6, 7 and 8, these 3 years. That was surprising and rather unfortunate. But that is what was said by the ministry. And then when we looked deeper into the question, it was revealed that that was going to be, if we did not do it that way, as the ministry said, it would then create trouble because there would be a conflict with the 3-language formula, which is part of the national integration effort of India policy in 1968, 3-language formula after Tamil Nadu protested against imposition of Hindi, and revised in 1986 under Rajiv Gandhi's new education policy. So they said this would militate against the idea of the 3-language formula, and if you wanted to learn German, that would be an extra language, not part of these 3. There are politics again, not necessarily the 3-language formula. The assumption that the language, Sanskrit, is not only a pure language, but that it was a highly developed language, that is the language for computers. Strange that the language for computers was born in this country, or at least imported into this country from the Proto-Indo-European languages, but no computer was made in this country. It is strange. It is also strange that the chauvinism that we are against in any colonial context does not apply to us when we talk in glowing terms about a language which is not really a living language anymore because it stopped functioning in society and meeting the needs of society. How did Latin die? What made Latin disappear? How do languages die? Languages die when people stop being proud of them, speaking them, transmitting their knowledge in them, and they stop giving education in them. And when the language refuses to cooperate with development and adopt vocabulary and create vocabulary that will suit the needs of society. That is how languages die. It is in that context that European languages got a beating last year, somewhere around now. I think it was in October that the policy was declared. That meant 70,000 pupils who were going to school in Kendriya Vidyalaya. There are about 1100 Kendriya Vidyalaya in the country. In 500 of them, well-qualified German language teachers produced by the Goethe Zentrum, Goethe Institute, were told that they couldn't teach German anymore as a third language. 70,000 people. 250,000 people learned the French language in various schools and colleges and universities in the country. And something like a bit less than 40,000 students or learners of language, young and old, learn them in the Alliance Française. That's a big number of people, huge number of people learning these languages. You will be, however, surprised to know that Professor Pujol's Cervantes Institute is the one institute which in 2014 got the maximum enrollment of any institute Cervantes around the world. 4,800 people joined to learn the Spanish language just in Delhi. The Alliance Française has 14 centers, the Goethe Zentrum has 10. That's why their numbers are big. But the real interest, looking at this sample, is in the Spanish language. Why? Because the most promising of all languages that reach us from Europe, and I'm not including here English, because it has taken on a different dimension, is that of the Spanish language. If you know the Spanish language, a new world opens up to you, and that's not Spain. That is Latin America. That is South America, with the exception of Brazil. Everything, everywhere in South America is Spanish. Not Spanish, South American Spanish, but nevertheless, it's in the family. If you go to Costa Rica and you try to speak Spanish there, or to Mexico and try to speak there, it would be, as our Spanish teacher would confirm, it would be very different to what one would learn in Spain. But the fact is, that is the Spanish which one needs to become. Why should we learn international languages? I will no longer call them foreign, because I think it's right to say international languages. Look, so many people speak Mandarin. In fact, the largest number of language speaker group is Mandarin, Chinese. Not Cantonese, not Hakka, but Mandarin. Whether everything can be put under the hat of Chinese is not clear, which is why we say Cantonese and Mandarin is the largest speaker population. Which is the next language in that list? Spanish. Which is the next in that list? English. Which is next in that list? Depending on whether you will count Maithili and Vaidehi and so on as part of Hindi, it might be Hindi. Depending on whether you would count the speakers of North Africa also as speaking Arabic, it might be Arabic. But Hindi and Arabic are close by. That's the numbers. So if so many people speak Hindi, and Urdu is not very, very far, it's not near, but it's not very far, why not learn Urdu? Why should we learn French or German? I mean, if more people speak Urdu, why not? There is an active bomb-making industry in Pakistan. We can join hands. Technology and transfer. But why don't we do it? Simply because this language is concentrated in one geographical location. It has no real economic impact. Do not get me wrong. Urdu is a wonderful language. It's a language of culture, of civilization. It's a courtly language. It's a language of the great culture of Hyderabad or Lucknow, or when it mixed up with other languages and we had Hindustani, we also know what it has done to making India one. But it has no international significance. That is the point I'm trying to make. When I say international language, I'm not actually counting numbers, but I'm looking at extent. For example, you might say that French is the official language in 25 countries. Now, it opens the doors to 25 countries. In some countries, like in all of Latin America, which are also catching up and emerging, there is an opportunity, business and professional. If if you know the local language. Now, we know that somebody had said once, Nelson Mandela in fact, that when you speak to me in your language, in an international language, I understand what you say. When you speak to me in my mother tongue, then I understand what your heart says. You feel close to people when they speak your language, because language is identity. Language above all is identity. It's also a matter of human rights, that we should be able to cultivate our language and speak it. Imagine that as a student of a language, you have learned the Spanish language, and then you try to expand business or seek professional opportunity in a Spanish-speaking country. You will find that the doors are easily open to you. I can tell you that in my own case, when I first went to France, I was still a teenager, and I went to the south of France. I had booked to stay as a paying guest in Paris for a month. I was not allowed to stay as a paying guest. The person who was with me traveling in south of France said, "How dare you say you will stay in a paying guest facility when I have known you and we have become friends?" An almost stranger, he took me to his apartment in Paris, gave me the key, and he said, "This is where you will stay. Now let's go and get back the money that you paid as a paying guest." And we got back the money. I did interpretation for a team of people who came from Mali to Hyderabad on a very sinister mission. I will not bore you about those details. But I became friends with them. When I was going to France, these are people from Mali. I am considered generally not short by Indian standards. People from Mali are of the height where I am somewhere near their elbow. So really giants. Not very well educated. They moved to Paris to practice, as I said, a sinister profession. They were black magic people. And I actually, being a rationalist, fighting against these things, had a unique insight into the mafia that operates in Twin Cities. But that's a different story. When I wrote to them that I was coming to Paris on this particular day in the morning, I did not tell them anything. I said, "I hope there will be a chance to meet you." When I get out of the airport, here are these unmistakably tall two people waiting for me. They came at 6 in the morning and they were waiting for me, not knowing which flight I would be in. They took my bag and they said, "We are going home." I was overwhelmed by this generosity. And then this is also an extraordinary experience. One of them took my bag, the other took my hand and walked me to the ATM. The euro was not around, and he withdrew 4,000 French francs, the old French francs, 6 rupees a franc then. Put them in my pocket, and I said, "What?" And he said, "In Mali, when a younger brother comes home, he gets some money." This is somebody with 4 wives, 14 children. They live in Mali, and every 6 months a batch of 4 comes. I'm not joking. That is how they live their lives. They earn enough to feed the 14 children and these 4 flight tickets every 6 months to come, and you have to send a batch and bring a batch, so it's not easy. But that's the kind of business they are able to do because they learned the French language. So French language also has its advantages. I think the relevance of the French language is that it continues to be the working language of Europe. German, yes, but French as well. When the European Union was founded, it really was French which was the working language. And then the other languages, for matter of principle, were included or adopted as the main language, at an equal status with French. Now, France has some interesting outreach towards India. I can speak to you about it with some personal knowledge, though not recent. A long time ago, for the French embassy, I developed a center for a resource center on science, culture, and also commerce. The French government policy has been one of outreach to India, developing language learning here, spreading through culture opportunity for business. Let us be clear about it. Through culture to create opportunity for business. Nobody is coming to India to teach you poetry, to teach you what dance is, to tell you how the French were singing 500 years ago. Don't take it too seriously. There is a business objective, but business is not wrong. It's only that we should know what the objective is. Nothing wrong with business, nothing wrong with profit, if it is legal and done the right way. Absolutely fine. The French want to sell Rafale aircrafts. The French want to establish nuclear reactors in the country. The opportunities that will be a result of that are extraordinary, apart from the radiation that comes with the nuclear reactors. So you shall be called to give the technical expertise for massive enterprises. The metro in Hyderabad has French technical input. Those of you who learn French, as was the input partly in Delhi and mostly in Kolkata. These are new economic opportunities. So I started off by telling you, when I joined to learn French, I had absolutely no idea why I was doing it. It was fun, it was enjoyable. Learning a language is a matter of great pleasure and joy. Being introduced to a new culture is an exercise and an adventure of discovery, and nothing can beat that experience. But I also told you what that person came to me, and not only one person, and said, what will I get if I learn French? I'm telling you what you will get if you do learn these international languages in India today. Increased economic opportunity, the possibility of participating in an economy which is not only English-based. And this is very important. Let us link it with what exists today in national and regional educational policy. You know, some years ago, it was made a government policy that if you got a seat in an engineering college, your fees would be paid for by the government. And a huge number of people had their fees paid for. That is how every year, from every engineering stream, put them together anyway, you will look at something like 3 lakh, taking into consideration that several will fail, about 3 lakh engineers coming out into the market. That means in 4 years of engineering, you have 12 lakh students, actually 16 lakhs, I'm saying 12 will pass, all of them pursuing a stream. Yes, people can fail in engineering because many of these colleges don't even have instrumentation labs. They are established mainly to pay the fees to the management, which then pays the fees to the political party. That's very clear. But the fact is, this is how the educational system operates. Now, look at the crisis we are facing today. If every year you are releasing 3 lakh qualified or semi-qualified, unskilled engineers into the market, where will they get the job opportunities when we are not creating 10,000 engineering jobs? You have to look outside the country. You have to look at opportunity created by those who are coming from outside the country into ours. This is a fundamental, crucial thing we have to do. 2006, when I went public with my activity of skill group, and with no intention of bringing students to me, just simply to spread the word that there are a huge number of opportunities for those who speak languages. I organized a press conference because, sir, as you remember, there was a survey that released which said if you had 18 months, 12 to 18 months of part-time language learning of Spanish, German, French, 18 months, but even 12 would do, of part-time. What do we mean by part-time? 3 times a week, 2 times a week, 2 hours each time. With that, India was likely to get 5 lakh jobs in call centers and BPOs. Business processing and call center jobs with only so much work. That's not a lot of work. Part-time, 18 months, 2 hours, 2 or 3 times a week. 5 lakh jobs. It's an emergency. The opportunity is there. Government should infuse funds, start off people, bring people from France and Germany and Spain. Put them here and teach our students to learn these languages and establish lease line systems with these European countries and say, don't go to Vietnam and Philippines and Bangkok to establish your call centers. Here is a hospitable environment for you to do business. Nobody did it. Nobody did it. Satyam Computers lost 10,000 jobs. Top news, not about only Satyam Raju and his fraudulent activities, but mostly about the 10,000 jobs that people in Satyam were losing. 10,000 versus 5 lakh jobs. The media could not get the picture. Many of those jobs have bypassed India. But as a country, we are building newer skills. So we can live above that ecosystem and create jobs at a higher level as well, with engineering, with higher studies in an institution of higher learning like this, the top in the country like this. You can create for yourself opportunity and also the ability to reach out beyond what the Indian job market can offer. I think the one language that requires to be learned by all of us is today not so much European, though first Europeans migrated from there to Europe, that is Mandarin. The new economic opportunity is Chinese, Mandarin, and as you know, as I said to you, 70,000 years ago, when people migrated out of Africa, they came to India, some of them up to Andamans. From there, some 50,000 years ago, to Australia. 25,000 years ago, via China, some of them moved on to Europe. And some of who later again then came back to us with the Proto-Indo-European languages. So the circle comes back to where it began, at least as far as the Indian circle is concerned. Those languages are coming to us. The opportunity is there. If you speak German, obviously educational opportunity is an immediate thing in your grasp. There are scholarships. The relevance of the language is as much the relevance of German technology to Indian economy as the need for us to find high-skilled jobs. Germany's doors are still open, and not only to Turkish people, but also to Indians. Here in India, we are saying, it's okay, you don't have to learn German as a third language. You can just go to an Indian language as an option, including Sanskrit. In Germany, 14 universities are actually looking at teaching Sanskrit. Doesn't say much about economy and economic opportunity. It says a lot about how the country is oriented towards India. That's all. Nothing beyond that. We should not read more message into it. And the fact that Germany was one of the first countries, Goethe being one of the top persons, showed a great interest in Indian philosophy, history, culture, language. Some of the greatest Indologists that we can list come from the Germanic languages. Professor Professor Max Müller is only one of them. So this is very, very interesting as far as Germany is concerned. You don't want to pay your fees to go and study in America if they give you a visa to go. Then learn German or French or Spanish, because education in German, French, Spanish, in fact Danish, Finnish, Norwegian and Swedish universities is absolutely free. If you learn the language here, 2 years, 2.5 years, 1 year, apply for a university position in those countries. You will be able to go to a different country, learn their culture, their language, and a high quality education. And you will only be paying for your stay there. That's an opportunity. Apart from the United Kingdom, all these countries will let you find a job and stay on. The UK has closed its doors completely. There is no study work visa anymore in the United Kingdom. But the opportunity that the other European languages create is very, very interesting. The world is expanding. China's investment in Africa is higher than any single country's investment anywhere in the world. Please note this statistic. Africa is not one country, there are 54 of them there. But the fact is, in that geographical region, massive inputs of funding is happening from one country. India has started catching up. And when you go to Africa, you should go there with French, because a huge number of countries in Africa speak French as one of their main languages. Even in Algeria, French would be a language that would help you, even if you know Arabic. Now, these are opportunities created. That would be the relevance of learning this. But my request to you is, while taking advantage of all this, while profiting from the opportunity business and the globalizing world creates for the language learner, let us remember that language is not about jobs. Language is not about immigration. Language is more than that. It is identity. And we are all people of multiple identities. It's not that we are born with one language and therefore that defines our identity all through our lives. Those of us who speak more than one language, and that includes almost every Indian, quite contrary to how you will see people in mostly European countries beyond the age of 50. The younger ones are all exposed to English. They say that nearly 40% of Europe today, of the age group below 50, speaks English. That means they are catching up with the idea of learning a different language. It gives us multiple identities. It helps us live in several centuries at the same time, in several civilizations. It elevates us, it brings us knowledge, it brings us culture, wisdom, poetry, philosophy. It helps us live the mind, the life of the mind. This is the unquantifiable advantage of learning a European language. Because as I was saying earlier, what has Europe not got from Greece? I will expand that and say, what has the world not got from Europe? Everything that we are living in today, we got from Europe. As they said, as the great Will Durant said in his magnificent first volume, The Story of Civilization, Our Oriental Heritage, he said, civilizations do not die, they just migrate. And the great civilizations of India, the great civilizations of Arabia, simply migrated to what was the dark ages of Europe and found a hospitable soil to develop, to grow, to flourish, to give us the civilization of today. We might make fun of the Americans and say that they speak American, but that's English, which is from Europe. We might wear clothes that have once originated in India and in Arabia and in Persia, but Today they have come back to us through the medium of Europe. Dance, culture, art, most of the things we do. The modern scientific method, the modern scientific achievements, the great progress of civilization today is powered by Europe and through European languages. It's obvious. It's only in countries like India that we seek to progress through a language which is not our mother tongue or the dominant language of the region. In France, everything happens in French. In Germany, only in German. In England, in each region, in the English that is unique to that region. And so on and so forth. Here, we have not the luxury or even the inclination to do that work in our own languages. That is a problem. But we are not here to solve the policy level issues in the governance of the country. But what we can certainly do is take advantage of the opportunity that is created in a country which has 7% projected economic growth as opposed to 0% and minus in other countries of the world. Okay, you don't want to live in India, you want to go to the United States. Again, a European language apart from English will be to your rescue. It is clear that those who have Spanish will have a better chance of integrating with American culture, because so much of American culture has a predominant, especially the West Coast and the southern parts, predominant influence from the Mexican people, Spanish language. It creates opportunity, it helps us integrate with people. So these are some of the views. I believe I would have crossed the time allocated to